this is why I have this belief that you get to know your own story. You literally have to hear yourself speak over and over again, and you'll change the way you say words. Even if you see them on the page one way, you're going to read them out a different way because it's intuitive to you. And then you change the script to be that.
There's over 1.9 million podcasts. Most of them never see the results they expected. They want to monetize, but their show ends up costing them money, and they never achieve the listenership they desire. This show will help you launch, grow, monetize, and inspire with your podcast. Get ready to take notes, because here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, it's Adam Adams, and generally, as you may have gotten accustomed to, any even-numbered episode is supposed to be me alone pouring into you and your business. However, I did so many different interviews with so many really, really good people that on this episode today, even though this would typically just be me pouring into your business, me just sharing something short, like 5, 10, 20 minutes, where I poured into you and your podcast and growing your brand and really getting you in front of everybody. I'm going to do that today with an interview. So let's get right into it. Welcome back to the podcast on podcasting. It's your host, Adam AAA Adams, and I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about narrating your podcast, knowing what to say, when to say it, how to insert yourself as part of the story, when to do that, when not to do that. And we've got Samantha Hodder, who is going to help us with that. So, Samantha, how are you today, by the way?
I'm doing great. I'm really enjoying seeing the sun come up. The snow's melted here, and we're going to get some real vitamin D, not out of a tube anymore.
Well, it's good having you. And your show is, the name of your podcast is This Is Our Time. Let's start by talking about why you started that podcast and what it's about.
Wow, it feels like a long time ago now, but way back in 2016, I was wrapping up. I was winding down a different podcast, and I said to myself, I want to do a different podcast that follows one story. At the time, I thought that was going to be a faster way to production. I was going to really get into it. I thought if I just took one story and made it really big and dove into it, the story would tell itself. And I knew someone who was going on an expedition to Antarctica at the time. And it was an innovative idea. The record has since been broken, but at the time it was the largest all-female, all-scientist expedition to Antarctica aboard a small ship. And they would spend 3 weeks in a sort of leadership development seminar mastermind. I like to call it, it's like an MBA with a 21-day retreat feeling put on top of it. And I said, all right, well, I want to do this. So I approached her and said, maybe I'll make a story about this, intending it to be 20 minutes long. And as I dove in, the story just kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger around me. And I should mention in the year 2016, that was a pretty heady time in the world of women's rights. That was when Hillary was running for the presidency. And at the time, it actually seemed like she was going to win. And it felt like the whole world was changing. So I dove in headfirst with this story. And then the expedition went to Antarctica, and the woman who I knew who I was working with took a recorder with her and took some audio. And I decided to follow the storyline of about 4 of the people on the ship before, after, and while they were there, they did audio diaries. And so now here I am. The story grew. It grew organically. It grew because I fell in love with the story. It grew because the characters were really compelling. It grew because I thought if I could take a listener to Antarctica, what a great deal. I mean, no one gets to go to Antarctica, so why don't I take them in an audio adventure there? And then I developed, so the story went on. And as I dove into this idea, I realized, okay, wait a second. I'm now the host of a story. I'm the producer of the story. I'm the narrator of the story. And the other women in the story are frankly more compelling than I am, but you have to stitch them all together. They have to make sense together. And the only way to do that is to narrate the story and draw them together and make the mental leaps that your listener is kind of waiting for as they listen to it. And that's when I realized, and I was uncomfortable with the idea originally, that I was going to narrate the story. I'm telling a story about going to a place that at the time I had never been before. That's kind of weird. I was narrating a story about women that I had never actually met in person. And to this date, I've only met one of them, maybe 2 of them in person. But, these people that I got to know virtually, back before it was fashionable to do this or a reality to do this, it felt strange. But I pressed on. And I learned a few things about what it's like to be so deeply inside the story that you have to literally work to get yourself out of the story in order to tell the story.
So these women, I think there 3 or 4. I might have missed writing that you're writing about for the narrative that were traveling on the ship. Was there 3 or 4?
Well, there were 80 women in total, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, no, it was a large group. There are 80 or so of them,
Yeah.
and I was only able to follow a small section of them.
So the small section of them, do they come on your podcast as interviewed guests, or do you interview them separately and then talk about their story?
So I did sort of all of the above. I did interviews at the beginning, and that was, they live all over the world, so that was just done virtually. And then while they were on the ship, they did audio diaries. They recorded some audio diaries for me, which they sent to me. And then when they got home, I did exit interviews with them. So they don't actually, the difference I think between your style of podcast and the storytelling pilot style of podcast is there's no coming on the show. You do an interview and then it is recorded, and then you take the part of it that you need to tell the story and that makes sense. You never use, I've done, I don't know, 50 hours of interviews for that, and maybe 2 hours of it go in. It's an incredibly high ratio of the number of hours of interview done to yielded the number of used minutes. It's hours to minutes. And so
Yeah.
it's a bit of a different, it's a production. It's think of it more like a film where you're recording and then you take it to the editing room and you chop out all the parts that don't make sense to the story. Because, they talked about 12 different subjects and you're really only focusing on 2 of them. So you go to those 2 subjects and the rest of it's gone.
So I think that I remember about this, that it took you like 6 months or something to produce the first episode, or am I way off base?
Well, let me. In the end, I ended up publishing them almost all at once, which has a backstory to it, and that is both pragmatic and a reality. In the world of podcasting, S-Town had recently done that, which makes sense when you're This American Life, and I think at the time it made sense for me to do it, but really it doesn't make sense, and I will never, ever, ever do that again. You never barf onto the internet and run. That's a bad idea. But I didn't have much of a choice because I had a very short timeline where all of a sudden, in the middle of producing, getting to the end of finishing season 1, I was actually invited to go to Antarctica with the expedition. And I had to, finish editing, dump it, barf it onto the internet, pack my bag, figure out what I needed to bring with me to record in Antarctica, figure out how I was going to be away for a month, and then literally run to the airport. So didn't have a lot of time, which isn't the way I would do it again. I would have a lot more time to prepare. So I think in total, the production timeline for season 1 was about 1.5 years. And then I got home from Antarctica in April, I'd say, about April of 2018. And here I am. What is it? We're 2021. And I am looking to release season 2 in about 6 weeks' time. I haven't set a date to it yet, but there's a story where I got lost inside the story. And I think I told you that I got lost in there and I had to figure out how to get out of there. And so the timeline, it makes zero sense, $0, 0 cents in order to make a storytelling podcast. You do it because you love it. It's like writing a book. You want to tell the story in the way you're telling the story. It makes 0 monetary sense. And you do it when you absolutely are compelled to do it, which is maybe foolish, but it feels good. Maybe. Hopefully it will soon.
One thing that I think many people are curious about is seasons. And for you had the first season, and now you're coming out with the second season. What takeaways would a new podcaster have when thinking about seasons, when to have them, when not to have them, if they should have them or not, and how to publish them? I know that's a loaded question, but just kind of think about the seasons and give us a few takeaways so that we know if we should have them or not.
Well, I think if you're working as an independent and you don't have a whole lot of resources at your ready and you don't have a lot of backstopping you, seasons are great because it's really hard to show up, every week, every other week and do something and produce. Like, to keep publishing on a schedule is hard. So I sort of stole this model from A lot of NPR stations do this. Even the huge ones like Radiolab and NPR and This American Life, they take time off. They have a regrouping thing. For me, it makes sense because it's like a book. I equate it more like a book or a film, that season 1 is a unique product and season 2 relates to it, but it's not the same thing. I didn't intend for there to be so much time between the two of them, but then, that happened. And that's actually part of the story. And so I made that part of the story. So I think it makes sense if you're telling a narrative story that really does have a start. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it makes sense if you're working as a small independent and you need a break because you need to, have some downtime. You need to actually go into the field and do some recording. You need to read some books to feel energized, or you do some other job in between. I think there's no magic to the publishing schedule. I think you are what you are and you do what you do. And there's a really long tail on the internet for podcasts. So, do what you want and do what it makes sense for your story and your life.
So as far as my big promise to the listener today is helping us to understand if we are going to do this type of podcast, if we're going to have a storytelling podcast and being the narrator, understanding how much to insert ourselves into the story, understanding how to be an effective narrator to share the stories of other people, other women in your case, that were actually in that story. What tangible takeaways would you have for us when we're trying to copy you in a way and do a similar type of podcast?
One of the techniques, I learned it along the way from a couple places, but one of them is a guy named Rob Rosenthal who runs the Transom Storytelling Workshop, which is a fantastic, wonderful experience. He's a genius. And he introduced the idea of a table read where you get all your tape together and then you put it into cuts. You have your buckets. This is your first scene. There's scenes. This is my first scene. This is my second scene. This is my third scene. And you lay it out on your timeline of whatever DAW you're using, digital audio station. And then you write a script. And so what you do is you have the audio on your screen and then you play it in order. And then you sit and you read your script to yourself. So then you start to see, does that make sense? Does that work? And so you're using this as sort of an emulator of this is what it would sound like. If you kind of like that, the next thing I would do is take my iPhone and use the voice memo feature. So I would do I call it a scratch recording where I just literally talk like this, do my little bit, finish it, share it, airdrop it to my computer, drop it in the timeline, and then listen to it as it goes. So it's actually sounds shockingly good. Then it starts to give you the flavor of what it is when you piece it all together. So this is why I have this belief that you get to know your own story. You literally have to hear yourself speak over and over again, and you'll change the way you say words. Even if you see them on the page one way, you're going to read them out a different way because it's intuitive to you. And then you change the script to be that. So it's this kind of iterative process where you get your buckets of tape and you put them in scenes and then you start to read them out. And then you get to know the story by being the narrator, by practicing, by doing these sort of these rapid prototypes. And that is super efficient. And always, always, always use a script. Never try and speak off the top of your head. Never try and fit it into, a timeline. Say you have 30 seconds to say it, you're going to say it. You use the script. And then you just have to get better and better at reading the script to make it sound like you're not reading the script.
Yeah. I think that part's super interesting because I'm about to record a video and I'm doing the same thing that you just said, which is so interesting. Wrote the script and then I start practicing it and I just can't say it the way that I wrote it. So I actually have to change the words of it on the paper so that it can be congruent with how I really talk. And it is very interesting because I've noticed what you just said. I've noticed that in my own life as I'm reading these scripts, writing these scripts for me to say on advertisements or anything else. I'm like, that just doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound like, it sounds like I'm reading. It sounds like I'm trying to be too perfect. And I just want to talk. I just want to feel natural. And so you actually write the script to sound natural. And I think that's interesting how you said that. So you said the audio is on your screen You play it in order, read your script yourself, then take the iPhone, use it as a memo feature, airdrop it to yourself, and you have to hear yourself speaking so you'll be able to change those pieces of the script. And you'll get to know the story intimately by being the narrator and practicing. I want to make sure that I understand everything you said, because I don't yet, and that's okay. Because if I don't, that means the listener probably doesn't either, and they need to have that takeaway. So I'm going to ask the dumb questions. How is your audio on your screen? I don't get it. What do you mean by audio being on the screen?
That's in the editing program. So when I edit audio, I wish I could show you the screen, but I have a stupid number of tracks because each track is for a different person or for a different reason. So I have 3 sound effects tracks. I might have 2 music tracks. I have a narration track. I have a scene tape track. I have tracks for each of the characters in the scene or in the story, so that if I want to say, oh, what did Fabian say? I just go to Fabian's track and then go along. So you have to picture the score. Right now I use Hidenburg. I often use Adobe Audition. There's a lot of people use Pro Tools. There's Reaper. There's Audacity even will do this. So instead of editing your audio only on one track, it looks like an orchestral composition where there's a million different tracks. So they, it goes in a linear time, and then the different characters come in at the different places. So that's when I say audio on the screen, I literally mean I'm looking at my editing screen and the audio is there. So here's a story with Adam. I play that, and then it comes to the end, and then I look at my other screen where my script is, or I printed it out, and I read it out to see if it makes sense. And then I go to the next one. That's what a table read is, where in film world, the table read is all the actors sit at the table and read aloud not in character or like in minor, just sitting at a table, what they say to each other. And when you do that, you start to hear things that just don't sound right. No one talks like that. And then the next layer is, okay, I'm going to commit to recording what it is I think should be in the script. So then I record the script. Even sometimes then as I'm reading it, it sounds different because I mix up the words and I put them in a different order because that's the intuitive way. So then I listen to myself as I do that and I change the script. And then I use the AirDrop feature to put my voice memo in as my scratch recording. And then I listen to it all. And then sometimes I cut out half of it because it's just too long, or I say the wrong thing first. So then I do the editing feature. I meant to say that thing first, or it makes more sense when you say it first. Because often I've found when you're writing a script, what you write first is what you say second or third or even last. And when you speak, you say the thing that you wrote third really needs to go first.
This sounds like a lot. So I'm wondering, who does all this? It sounds like it's you doing it. If it is you, how much time does it take? If you're giving this off to somebody else, how much money does it cost to get all of this done? So my question is, it sounds like a ton. So who's doing all the work?
I haven't really worked with an editor before because I'm a bit of my own casualty that I have all these skills to do them. So I then fuss with them for too long. But I mean, that job is called the assistant editor or the audio editor, where they take the raw clips and they put them down. So if I had production house working with me, I would have an assistant editor who would log and maybe transcribe and cut down the full tape into smaller bits. And then a lead editor would put it into a timeline. And then there'd be a sound editor or a sound mixer or a sound technician who would sort of then take it and balance it and put in sound effects and make it all sound fantastic. And my current process is when I get to that stage, I will hire that out and do that. And the other thing I will do is go into a proper recording studio and record the narration that I've now scripted. So I've gone through the whole iterative process. Then I land on a final script, and then I go into a proper sound booth and record it well. And then some kind of editor just drops the new clips in on top of the old clips.
I am with you. I'm not confused anymore, which I think hopefully the listener is with us too. So this is called This Is Our Time, and it was kind of born around the time Hillary was running for presidency, and it really shows this is our time, women in leadership, forging ahead and inspiring others. This is our time. My last question for you is, well, my penultimate question. Is there a season 3 to This Is Our Time after this second season that you're launching in a few weeks?
At this point, I don't think so, actually, because I think I've really drowned in this story for a number of years. And frankly, I'm excited to leave it behind and do some different stuff. And, I think the narrative timeline was I dreamt of going to Antarctica. That was season 1. Season 2 is I actually went to Antarctica, and it tells the story of what it was like to be there. So where do you go then? I can't think of where it will go. And yeah, I've had lots of thoughts of, do I transition this into a more tenable production schedule where I do interviews, or and at this point I haven't decided to do that. I might just leave it on the shelf as its own story and move on. But at this point, 5 years later, I just can't wait to get the second one out.
To me, it sounds like a movement. It sounds like something a lot of people, especially women, can get behind and would want to promote this if you had a third or fourth and fifth and sixth season. I just see This Is Our Time being a movement that would be difficult to get away from. Maybe it's not the same story, maybe it's a different story, but I love it. And I want to suggest that the listener go and check it out. If this interests you, This Is Our Time, to check out season 1, and probably season 2 will be out around the time that this comes out.
Let's say yes. Let's do that.
Let's do it. All right. Well, the very last question is, I really want you to pour into the new podcaster, give them a couple tips that are outside of what we've talked about so far that can help them to be a better podcaster, regardless of what type of podcast they host.
Number one is you got to listen. You've got to, and figure out the nuance between the different listens. Like there's a style. It's interesting. There's different styles that are emerging. So when you listen to an audiobook, that's one of its own style. There's business podcasts and niche podcasts out there, and they're their own style. And then there's, NPR has created basically a whole genre of their own. And yeah, there's a lot to dive into. There's a really wonderful resource called The Third Coast, which is it's an independent audio festival that, up until recently was in person. It happens in Chicago in the fall. It's either in October or November. And they have great resources, great ideas, and their playlist, the listen list from that will kind of set you off to discover the world of audio narrative storytelling. And then I think it's just really teaching yourself. What I didn't realize, I thought everyone just edited audio, and I realized that not a lot of people do. A lot of people record and then put it up on the internet. And I think actually the process between that and making a few editing tweaks, learning how to use a system to put it out there at a higher quality, or condense. So if you had a 45-minute conversation, 20 minutes of it is actually interesting to other people. Compel yourself, figure out how to go on Udemy, go on YouTube, figure out, there's all kinds of free resources to teach you how to edit it down, and just cut it down. As many audio teachers have told me along the way, less is more, less is better. So figure out how to get to less.
I'm still taking notes. Love it. Less is more. Now, let me see if I can recap a little bit about what we learned from Samantha Hodder today. Whew, that was a lot. And it was really interesting to me because I do a totally different type of podcast where every podcast episode is unique to itself. It's always valuable. You don't have to start in the beginning. Yours, it's like, you kind of got to be through it to really feel it. And it's like reading a novel compared to reading, maybe the best thing is those books that we had in college, textbook. You go to a chapter, you learn something. You go to a different chapter, you learn something. But yours is more like a novel where you want to be part of the story. You're getting hooked in. You're being attracted to all the characters and what they're doing and what they're thinking and what they're feeling. So it's very interesting. Again, the podcast title is This Is Our Time. You can find it wherever you're listening to this podcast. Just go and find it. And when you do, and you check it out and you leave a rating and review, just mention where you heard of Samantha. Just say, hey, I heard you on Adam's show. So anyway, Samantha, let me mention a few things that we got here. Number one, follow storyline of a few people on that ship. 2016 is when you started it. You've got the 2 seasons. The one's coming out soon and probably will be out by the time you're listening to this. So go and check that out. You mentioned how you put the audio on your screen, how it was laid out. It's in your editing software, how you play it in order. You read your script to yourself. And you mentioned all of the time and effort that it takes to be this type of creative. Airdropping it to yourself, practicing, rewording it, reworking how the script is, and re-recording it so that it sounds just right. How you haven't really pushed that off to somebody else because you're good at it, you love it, and you really have that creative mind. You mentioned that even though it's a lot, you've enjoyed it. I'm trying to talk you into a 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th season. Maybe we'll see them.
Maybe.
And another thing that you mentioned as we were wrapping it up is the listen. It reminds me of real estate. I know you and I both have a little bit of real estate investing. Location. If you're trying to do real estate, those are the 3 most important things. If you're trying to do a podcast, those are the listen. Those are the most important things. Listen, understand, identify, and be able to regurgitate it. No matter what kind of podcast you're doing, whether it's your type or mine, listening is very critical. Then we talked about the Third Coast Audio Festival, if people want to get more resources. You talked about having a higher quality recording and audio production, and trying to see, you mentioned Udemy, which is a place where they can go to learn more about this. And you finished on less is more, and how you take 50 hours of recording sometimes, and it comes down to just a couple of hours. And you're really trying to hone in what's the most important parts. I heard somebody talk about, sorry, my email was so long today, I didn't have time to make it shorter. You are spending that time to really condense it and put the most important things in for your listener. And I want our listener to go and check it out, give you a rating and a review. Samantha, thank you for jumping on the show. I'm going to let you go. And to the listener, if you're a podcaster and you've been podcasting for a while and you're not really getting the traction that you want, you're not really getting the listeners that you expected, and you feel like you're at a plateau, you want to go to the next level, then go to growyourshow.com and let me help you. Let me help you grow your show. Let me help it bring it to more listeners so that you can get your message out, so you can start monetizing your show. Again, that's growyourshow.com. I'm Adam Adams. This has been Samantha Hodder from the This Is Our Time podcast. Go and check it out wherever you're listening to this show. Bye for now. This episode is brought to you by growyourshow.com. Grow Your Show lets you be the star of your show while we handle all the hard stuff. We offer reliable and affordable post-production services that allow you to grow your show organically without all the work. So go ahead and check out the website right now, and feel free to schedule a call with me, and let's take your show to the next level. Again, growyourshow.com. You just press record. We handle the rest.